Let me just gather my thoughts here. Da-da-da-da-da. You guys are staring at me. It's putting the pressure on.
No, I'm quickly just doing something.
Do you feel like you're peeing in the toilet and we're just watching?
I am. The tagline for Get a Grip is business, tech, angst, and imagination. Business because the three of us, Sam, Philippe, and I, run our own small video production companies. Tech because video production is nothing without tech. Angst is the frustrations that one can encounter, the struggles that one can encounter with clients or things going wrong on a shoot or deadlines, everything across the board. And imagination, of course, is, I think, fundamentally why all of us got into this to begin with. It's all about having dreams and pursuing those dreams and helping clients and other people fulfill their dreams and watching their dreams come to life. We wanted to create a space that was uncensored. There was no political correctness. The whole point of Get a Grip was to have industry professionals sit down together and candidly discuss problems and solutions that we all encounter. It happens that the three of us are using the same camera at the moment. We all have our preference in post of using Final Cut Pro 10, but this is not the Final Cut Pro 10 show. This is not the Panasonic show. That just happens to be what we have in common. We are and always have been interested in having guests from all across the industry, using any software, any cameras. That's completely irrelevant to us. The more viewpoints, the more opinions, the better the show will be.
In terms of what do we need to get a grip for in this episode is pretty much organization. Organization, workflow. So today is all about post-production. You come back from the shoot, you have all of those files. What do you do with those files? How do you import it? How do you organize it? And how you deal with it through the post-production until you archive it, right? And I think all of us have our unique ways of dealing with that, and there are a lot of things that we agree with, some things that we don't. Although, like Gabriel said, we all edit on Final Cut, we all are shooting on GH5 at the moment, but we also shoot with other cameras depending on the projects. We shoot with Red, we shoot with FS7, we shoot with a bunch of Sony cameras, we shoot with Blackmagic cameras. That the fact that we are recording this right now, GH5 doesn't say anything, really. And I think the organization is where I found that we differ quite a lot.
Yeah, we had some differences, but that's kind of where. Well, I don't know about you guys, but every kind of 6 months or maybe more, I usually kind of look at my folder structure and the way I organise stuff, the way I kind of do my workflow and go, do I need to change anything? Do I need to make things a little bit like, yeah. Me and Gabe are laughing at that because it's pretty much every other month for me. I kind of go, I need less folders, or I need this, I need that, I need to do this differently and things like that. So
yes,
we've recently gone through a bit of an update, all three of us have, and we've kind of collaborated really well on.
That was awesome.
Yeah, on a little thing that we've kind of worked on. So
anytime you label a client's file final, you guarantee there are going to be revisions. And I found similar with my post-production workflow. Every time I think I have this is the perfect workflow, that guarantees within a few months I'll have a new idea. And I'm way OCD about it. Every time I change my project structure, I pull up every single archive drive and update the structure of every project I've ever done.
That is definitely very OCD.
Yeah, but now when I plug in a drive, it all looks the same. Will the client ever see that? No, but then I can
for
sleep
your own
and,
sanity.
The universe is peaceful.
Balance has been made. Balance has been restored in the universe. But
yes.
I very much the same. I've recently just bought a new hard drive as well. Nothing fancy, just a Seagate expansion drive, just to kind of offload some files that I'm not using anymore, or projects that have kind of been archived I don't need for a little bit, just to kind of make some space on my main edit drive. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to go through and just make sure things are organised in the right way. I'm going to use the same structure, and I'm just going to go through and go, right, that's the library there, and I might consolidate to the library and then consolidate out to those folders just to make things a little bit easier. And yeah, that's what I'm doing now. But I think like it's the first time I've actually collaborated with other people on a structure that's quite flexible and robust. Because the one thing that I'm a big fan of is the aesthetic design of a folder. I know it's kind of weird because I made these folder icons ages ago, but over the last couple of months, I've found them really restricting. Like, really, I don't know what the word is. I'm trying to find the word, but it's like, you can't move very much with them. If, for example, I have folders set up for Final Cut, Motion, and After Effects and Premiere, but a client gives me a project in Resolve or something stupid like that, or they say, well, I have folders for everything else except this one particular thing, and it's like, I've got to make a new folder for that, but it doesn't have an icon. It breaks my little package thing that I've got going on.
Yeah, well, and the other side effect of that is by having so many subfolders, it requires so many extra clicks every time you do a project. So rather than, if you're going to do a folder for all of your NLE projects, just put everything in there. Because if you have a separate, specific folder for each NLE, that's another extra click. And I don't know how many times you refer to that per day, but
exactly.
We're doing millions and millions of clicks a year. Even shaving off 10.
The only thing I do kind of break that into is just for exports. Like I do have subfolders for each revision. For example, if I do 2 versions in a day, I just date the folder. That's what I do.
Now,
Frame.io,
Question on that. Why not, this is where we maybe differ, why not just put that information in the file name itself instead of needing to put it in a folder?
Well, I use Frame.io, which does it
now I do
automatically.
both, which is through Frame.io.
Yeah, so I do Frame.io. So what that does is when I keep the rendered file, it makes a new folder, throws in the XML, throws in a preferences file or something like that.
There's a plist there, I think.
Something that the app reads from to get the file info and such, and the file itself. But I do put the date in the file with the version number and then the name, obviously.
One question, why the date? Because on the OS you have the timestamp of the creation of that file.
If I upload it to, for me, it's like if I upload it to Frame.io or if I send it through a different thing and they say, well, when did you make it? And I go, well, I made it on this date. And if I modify that file, for example, if I overwrite it in the future for whatever reason, I know that the original date is that. It's a bit of a silly thing, but I've had situations where I've overwritten a file and the date modified has changed, and I've gone, when did what can I search to find the original file or find the original project file of that, if that makes sense. It's a bit of a funny thing. Like After Effects does it a lot, where I oversave a file by accident because it doesn't know to make a new version, or the naming it adds 1 or whatever, and I'm like, which version is it? So that's why I put the date in usually. Plus, when I send to a client, they know what date I exported it on, and they can go, no, I met the deadline, it's there, that's the date on the file, and that's kind of what I do. So,
well, that's for deliverables. Now, what about what you capture? So what I like to do, wherever possible, is I like to batch rename my actual media files. I do a lot of shoots for a client that captures with a Sony FS7. So there we have MXF files with a bunch of sidecars, which are a pain in the ass to deal with, and you can't batch rename them at all. So I'm kind of SOL there. But for example, when I'm on my own shoots, I'm shooting with normally 2 GH5s, which are just a single movie file.
Yeah.
So I created an automator script where you can just group select a bunch of files, right click, batch rename. It'll actually append sequence numbers to them as well. And I like to include lots of information like the date, the camera that was used, if it was A, B, C cam, interior, exterior, the talent name, and like the location abbreviated. I mean, the file names are a little bit shorter than they might seem. But and then followed by 001, 002, and then each of those would be in a separate folder for the camera card, for example, or the camera type. So I would have like a location footage folder in every project, and within that would just be dated folders so that they sort in order, because I date always with year, month, day, so they sort in order. And then within each folder is just the actual raw files. So when I drag that into Final Cut, or in this case it could be Premiere or Avid for that matter, would be irrelevant. All that metadata transfers through. What I don't like about renaming in Final Cut is it doesn't alter the Finder files.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't add it on Finder, so that for me is the biggest difficulty on understanding the workflow or the need to change on Finder is, at least personally, I never mess with Finder, and I think I mentioned there a few episodes ago the reason for that. For example, with stock files, you rename it to Blue Sky, and then suddenly you don't know where it came
from. A stock file, I would leave. I would not.
Yeah.
I would completely leave that.
But for me, the camera files. The file itself on Finder doesn't do anything to me. It only starts meaning something to me when it's on the NLE and I can see everything. And by the time that is there, I might have separated by camera 1, 2, A, B, C on Finder. So this way I have the keywords there, and then I can batch, add the metadata for all of them, and so on and so forth.
What about relinking? For example, Panasonic labels the clips, P010, whatever. On different days, you're going to end up with lots of the same files with the exact same file name.
Well, but on the GH5 specifically, you can rename the beginning of the file on camera. So you could have camera A as cam A, for example, and then there is the sequence of numbers, and the other one cam B. It's the same thing with Red and with Blackmagic. You can rename the beginning of the file. You can put the director. You can't do that with HH5 director operator and stuff, but you can with Blackmagic, and I think with the Red as well.
Can you do that with the Shogun though? I think you can.
You can do it with the Flame.
Flame,
yeah.
Yeah. So if you would have like 2 or 3 flames in total, you could have each one of them named
Flame A,
right?
Flame B, Flame whatever.
Yeah.
Which ties back into organization, but during production, of course, right? The same thing with if you have a F4 and F8 and you have iXML, you might want to name the channels.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're trying to focus mostly on post-production organization here. No, but there are clear things you can do prior to even shooting that will ripple through to post-production. And I know we've all mentioned iXML a bunch of times, as you just did. Being able to pre-program into your audio recorder, for example, the Zoom F4 or Zoom F8, or probably any sound devices units.
Yeah, a lot of things cross over, don't they? So
yes, but you could label lav or a shotgun or a safety track or Sam, Philippe, Gabe, Susan, Bobby, and that way all that information goes right through to your NLE if it can read iXML.
And in that case, for example, the audio files, if it's coming from an F8, do you also rename those on Finder?
I do.
The F8 records each track on a separate file, so
not necessarily. No. It can.
It's a multi-track recorder.
I normally record as separate files.
I record as polyphonic, so it's one audio file, but within there are all the audio channels.
Ooh. Do you like it?
They did it on the Zoom F4 and F8 because I don't think it does it on like the lower end ones, like the the H6 and stuff. Because
I have the F4 and I use a separate
I always
files.
find that's easier having polyphonic because that way you haven't got to have.
It's one file to sync.
It's one file to sync. Yeah,
and you can turn on and off the channels as you need them.
Yeah, you just disable the roles or the audio, the channel configuration, just disable which ones you don't, or range V, and they'd handle it.
So would it look like the channels that come from FS7 or from the FSM?
Yeah, it's basically exactly like that. So in the inspector, or if you're not a Final Cut 10 user, really just looking at any audio file. When you select it, you will see all the channels that are inside that one file. So on the Finder, it looks like anything, an iTunes track, except it's AIFF or WAV.
It's like a mix down, but when you break it apart in Premiere, in track-based editors, all the tracks come through as a massive, or I think they might come through as a multi-track audio file in Premiere.
Yeah,
it might come down with like a drop-down menu, and you can click it, and it'll bring up all the.
My only problem with that is that at this point, if you want to take advantage of audio roles, you would have to assign, because they all come as dialogue, right? So they are all, let's say,
unless you have iXML.
Exactly.
Well, but they come as sub roles, no? If they are in a polyphonic audio.
If I was to say we were in the same room right now and I was recording this, and I labeled Sam Philippe Gabriel on the Zoom F8 and recorded as a polyphonic file. It'll come in as whatever name file, probably dialogue. But when you look at that in the inspector or in the timeline index, each of the tracks inside there are going to be labeled already Sam Philippe Gabriel.
Yeah, inside dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
inside that one.
A sub-role.
So the
Well, you
iXML
can,
ripples
but
through.
you can break apart that into individual channels. In Final Cut, you break apart clip items, it breaks into individual.
Interesting. I think I'll try that the next time.
Yeah.
The reason why I like separate stems, generally I find it easier to. There was a problem in one of the microphones. There was some noise and etc. I find it very clear to see when that noise is happening when it's not supposed to. So, for example, because you will want then when you're editing to see all sub roles at the same. You want to always be seeing them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If they are separate, even if the sub roles are not active, you're still seeing them because they're separate files, right? But yeah, I see the point. I mean, I'm definitely not.
There's a sub roles button in the timeline inspectors. When you click that, it just expands them into the timeline, and you can edit them as normal files, what you would do with the individual stems, and then you just make your edits. You range for example, like if there's a bit of distortion on the mics, you want to dip to a backup mic, you just range.
Yes,
mute
I do
it.
that every week. Like I said, I do these big multicam shoots of the Sony, so there's no iXML there, but there are the polyphonic files, and somebody's mic is always cutting out consistently. So I actually created a keyboard shortcut for the timeline index to expand the rolls, because I'm going back and forth a lot. I collapse rolls while I'm editing, because otherwise when you trim the video, it mixes up the rolls and doesn't. So I collapse it when I'm editing if I need to roll and edit or ripple, but then I just shortcut to expand it, and then I can see the shorting out mic, range select it, drop it, close it up again. But yeah, you can still see instantly. Well, not instantly. Depends on how fast your Mac can draw your waveforms. But you can see all the problems right there. So it's, from the standpoint of Final Cut, it's irrelevant whether they were separate tracks or polyphonic files. They will appear the same to you.
Yeah, in my head, I still find some advantages on having the separate files. That just because the one thing that comes to my mind. If you wanted to
send them off to a client, if you wanted to, if they needed the files afterwards, you just record them as separate files and send them to them. Yeah, you could do it like that. But
the one thing that comes to my mind, because I think it was the last time I really used all the channels on my F4, was when I was recording a live band, and each instrument was in a separate channel. And then, of course, I was editing the song on Logic. Yeah.
I would very likely use separate channels for a musical performance, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in my head, I mean, I'm so used to thinking this microphone is one track, that microphone is another track. I mean, I think I don't have my head wrapped around not using tracks when I'm talking about audio. Of course,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with the way you're doing it.
Exactly. But it totally makes sense. I will definitely try using the polyphonic audio and saying it's already easier to manage just one file.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of like 6 mics, if you've got the Zoom F8 or the, if you have 8 microphones, it's 8 tracks for just one interview, for example.
So let me step back. One thing here, you got from the shoot right now. How is your process of going from the memory cards of your Zoom, of your cameras, into the computer?
You want to start, Sam?
I can do, yeah. Basically, my kind of things, I utilize Final Cut a lot for my particular workflow. Because I'm a solo guy, I don't need to worry really about renaming stuff half the time. I am going to kind of be concerned about that. I've always been taught, growing up at university, but going through university and growing up, I've always been taught to don't touch the camera card files, don't rename anything, don't do anything like that. Just leave them as is, and then rename them in Final Cut or in Premiere or whatever you want to do. Even though there's no batch renaming in.
But do you copy through Finder or do you use any other app?
In Final Cut Pro 10, I use the Camera Archives function. Mm-hmm. So I do sometimes duplicate media doing this way, but what I do is I don't actually have folders for each, depending on how many cameras. If I've got the one camera and we've just shot for the one day, or how many cards, for example. So say if I shoot for this and I fill up 2 cards, I put the date first. GH5, for example, camera GH5A would be GH5A camera, and then card 001, and then the next card will be the date GH5A camera card 2. So depending on how many cameras I use, depending on when I decide to use folders or not. But just the camera archives is a list with the dates, and then the card number is enough for me to kind of identify that. But I use that and then I import from the camera archives, because then I can just pop the card out and wipe it.
Just for those that are not Final Cut users. So basically what Final Cut does is you plug in the card on the computer, you open the import dialog, and it sees the card, and in the bottom you have an option to create a camera archive, which is a carbon copy of
it's a bit for bit
of the card.
Copy.
And then it has a one file only that goes into your Finder. You choose where it goes.
Yep.
And then from the camera archive that you're importing to Final Cut, right?
Yeah.
Which at the moment, at that point, creates a duplicate of the file. It exists in the camera archive and outside.
For Final Cut, basically, you have to create if you're importing from a camera archive or a camera card, you have to copy to the library or the library storage location. And I prefer doing that because I've got essentially a backup of the media, and then I can just send those camera archives to somebody else and go, that is everything from the card. If there's metadata attached to the files, it will be in that structure, even though Final Cut has, can't really see the metadata, it's there. And I just prefer doing it as a safety precaution over everything else. So I like to create up an archive, and that way I've got a backup, and then if for example, if I've carry the card back and they go, oh, can we wipe this? I go, yes, because I've made a backup. I've got a backup here. You can wipe that card. And then I'd copy that to another drive, or I'd, make another clone of it, essentially. That's kind of my workflow, but it's, it does vary depending on what I'm working with. So, I wouldn't do that with an Inferno or a Flame. I just import straight to, I'd create dated folders and copy those folders to the Finder, because they are ProRes files.
I've tried recently going back to using the camera archives, and it's kind of a no-go for me. With the Sony FS7, Apple documentation says that you have to use optimized media. That's not true. On a 5-year-old computer, I can edit it fine. On an iMac Pro, I can't. But I tried it anyway. I created a camera archive, and what it does is it automatically creates optimized media in the background. So it doubles all the storage space required. Mm-hmm. If I don't create a camera archive and I use the import window, which is what you're supposed to do to get all that camera metadata, and so far the only data I've found that is retained is nothing versus drag and drop. Even the camera name just says Untitled. Like there's no benefit there for me. And the problem is when you import the media through the import window, it will put all of the media in the one location you set library wide, which is never what I want. I want to put this card into a folder for that card. I want to put this import. So it just means you have to manually drag them after the fact.
You can move it afterwards.
But that's a lot of babysitting. So
it is very true,
I think I discovered this week one of the downsides of the import. Not a downside. The import window is fantastic in most ways, but it could use a little bit more refining.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree there. I think that's kind of a thing on everything. But again, I mean, it has advantages over other NLEs as well. It has the ability to import in the background. You've got to wait for things to import.
That is true.
Because I know Premiere, you have to kind of wait for the bar to go before you can actually start editing, which is great. And I've had occasions where I needed to get a quick turnaround through, and the background import was great. I just cut it through. I edited it faster before the import was finished, so I had to wait for it to finish importing before I could export, which is kind of funny. But it was one of those things where I created a camera archive, imported from the camera archive, because I had the space to spare. I thought I might as well, and then cut it through, and it was pretty quick, pretty efficient. So
now, when we all get home from a shoot, we are capturing our media, and before it goes into an NLE, unless you're using the camera archive method, we're putting it in the computer first. We're putting it in the Finder. What folders are you using? Is there a folder structure? Are you using something custom, or are you using, say, there's an app called Post Haste that will allow you to kind of save folder structures that you can populate different projects with. What's your process there, Sam?
I used to use post haste. I still do occasionally. I'm kind of in that mode where I'm debating whether or not I want to stick with it, or whether it's easier. I do not want to. Yeah, I don't. What's post haste again?
It's superfluous.
But yeah, so like it's a case of deciding whether or not it's all necessary for the work I do, and whether or not I can just stick with a zip folder or with just a smaller, lighter, like automated script that can just basically create the files that I need really, really quickly. I know Philippe's made something like that as well, so that like we could just be a case of going click name, client number, client name, sorry, project number, client name, project name, done. Everything's named. There we go, ready to start. And it's just a lot lighter and easier than faffing about with, menus and windows and data entries.
Just as we've talked about this in a previous episode, just as we've bounced our contracts back and forth and sort of helped each other refine our contracts, we've also done the same with the folder structure to a point.
Yeah. The other things are kind of, we've changed something. I know Philippe's changed some stuff. I know you've changed some stuff as well. I think mine and yours, Gabe, are kind of a lot similar in terms of kind of the layout and the structure. I've renamed a few things, and that's about it. But I know Philippe's kind of changed.
I have less subfolders.
Less subfolders and things like that. And
I have eliminated some, again, purely just for the sake of fewer clicks.
But there is one other thing that I wanted to comment. I mean, you two have very similar ways of importing stuff. Until up to, I don't know, a year ago, I was shooting purely Blackmagic cameras or Red cameras, and the Blackmagic is recording ProRes, and the Blackmagic and the Reds have the Red code. A lot of people copy those through Finder because it's just in case of the Blackmagic, it's just ProRes file, etc. Now, if you need to be at DIT, for example, on film set, you can't do through Finder. You need a method in which you're going to verify that what you copied is identical to the original. So, for example, in that case, even with the GH5, the way I copy is I use Hedge. Hedge is a little application that what you do is, which is very good. Their UI is phenomenal, and they do a checksum in the end. It's an MD5 checksum, which is not the best one, but at least there is a checksum done in the end. And anyone that will do an MD5 checksum anywhere in the world, if they do it on that file, it will come back with the identical hash if nothing has changed on the file. So I use Hedge, and if you plug in the SD card, you actually can choose all the locations to which that card will go. So in one action, you can put in your working drive, and you can put it on your backups. So if you need that thing to go to several places, including network drives, you can do Hedge will take care of that. And it's going to send a notification to your phone once it's over.
Yeah, I like that. I used that recently on a project where, unfortunately, I had to use Windows, and I had to use a trial version on the Windows one because I have it on my Mac, and I couldn't really spend another bit of money to get the Windows version. It was useful, but there's a lot of limitations on the Windows 3 version, which kind of meant that I couldn't use the renaming, because you can rename the folder. You can actually set up a script that will, each card you put in, it will append either, it will rename, it will give it the card name and then the date name automatically.
Could be useful for Gabe, I think. I mean,
exactly, yeah. So that's one thing I do use.
Yeah.
And it copies the whole card structure.
You can use it with the SSDs as well. It's
so once you go into Final Cut and you point at that folder, Final Cut will not have the option of leaving place, because once you look at that folder, Final Cut is seen as a memory card.
Yeah.
So you're going to create a duplicate. So, for example, you could put your SD card and say it send to these two backup drives, and for example, and then on Final Cut you can import from the backup drives, and it's going to import into your media folder, or you there is a number of ways that you can go around that, but it's interesting, and I like my biggest interest in that is the checksum in the end. It's just to have that
peace of mind.
That peace of mind, yes, that I really have my card backed up, and if a client ever comes back to you and for whatever reason, and there is something went wrong, you say, it is here. Here's the log. I copied. It was checked and something.
Yeah, you have that kind of security there. Yeah,
I'll have to look into that. There is, so like I said, I batch rename my files when I can to add some metadata, and normally the metadata is like crude technical stuff, just real short, the camera type and the camera name. But the rest of it is indicating the content itself. Who's on camera, what the location is, interior, exterior, which shot number. But I do like to add more metadata. And I was doing it in Final Cut. And what I was doing was creating a custom inspector template. Now, to those who aren't familiar with Final Cut Pro, we have a pane called the inspector. And that's simply where you view information about media types. It could be video, audio, metadata.
Not the info pane.
In Premiere, it would be like the metadata panel.
Metadata panel, that's the one.
And we can create custom fields. So as we've discussed, the GH5 records a ton of metadata, but Final Cut can't read most of it. So we can create fields to populate. So I could put in the shooter name, the date, all these different things. The problem is every time you reset your Final Cut preferences, all that information's lost. You have to recreate that library template. It can't be saved. And what I discovered recently is even projects that I had added that data to over the years, if you bring them back into Final Cut and that custom template isn't there, all that information's lost. So I decided it's, for me, pointless to even bother adding any information to that. Instead, what I've been doing, and I discovered this like 6 months ago and then forgot, and then a few days ago Sam reminded me how to do it. But you can, on the Finder level, I think most people know that if you select a single clip and go to File, Get Info, or just press Command-I to get info, you can add comments in the file. And that information stays with the file permanently, which I love. You can add comments to multiple files at the same time. And that has been huge for me. So what I'm doing there is adding the information that I was putting in the inspector, because I know not only does it stay in the NLE, it's with the file permanently. And what I use for that is like the lens I used, unless it's like run and gun and I change the aperture throughout the day, I'll have like my aperture or any filters on there.
And does Final Cut read those comments?
No, Final Cut doesn't read those comments, but I know they're there. And the reason I put that in there is because for example, I had a shoot recently. I did a shoot for a client last year, and they needed to reshoot a segment because some text information had changed. I had to go back. I wanted to make sure it looked the same so I could fit it into the video. So granted, all the information I saved in the inspector was gone. So had I these Finder comments, luckily I remembered what I did. But if this had been years ago, I could just look at the file, get info, look at the comments. You don't even need to get info, actually. You can just look at the comments in list view.
Yeah, you can list view, yeah.
And it would tell me exactly what lens I used, what profile I used on my camera, and that way I can replicate exactly all my setups. So for most of what I do, is that overkill? Sure. But it only takes a minute or less to add that data to all these files. It's there with them forever. And I like having that metadata there. Yep. Philip Hodgett's got me really into metadata. He's kind of the metadata guru.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, he's
and he has the Finder Cat, which brings in metadata out of Final Cut Pro into Finder.
I need to get that. Yeah.
I have it and I haven't used it yet. So maybe with these workflows that we discussed, maybe I will try to use it actually.
Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking of. Yeah. Sorry, Karen gave you interrupted you.
No. Finder Cat. To those of you who don't know, on Mac OS you can add what are called Finder tags, and they used to just be colored labels, but now those labels are kind of like labels on steroids, where you can have certain information. I don't know. You could create a blue tag for a client name or a camera type or whatever you want. Recipes. I mean, it's irrelevant what it is, but you can simply. There are a number of ways to add the tag, but you add the tag to files, and that information stays with the file permanently, or until Apple decides to get rid of Finder tags. And that information can be brought into Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro will create keyword collections, which are organizational tools based on the Finder tags or the folder names. And then Intelligent Assistants, I believe, correct? They created
Yes.
FinderCat. FinderCat will allow you to take any of that keyword metadata you've applied in Final Cut and append that to all of your files on the Finder level as Finder tags. So I've used that here and there. I'm in the process of developing a workflow where I don't end up with like a billion different Finder tags on my system. So, it takes some practice to figure out what works for you. But
I have to play with that. I'll have to get that because that's one thing I don't have in my toolkit arsenal is Final Cut or Final Cut Pro, which does I think Final Cut does it from Final Cut to the Finder, and then Final Cut Pro does it both ways. I think.
Yeah, I've got FinderCat Pro. I've also got Keyflow Pro, which will import your Finder tags as well. Keyflow Pro is a media asset management program, and
you need to get Keyflow Pro as well. That's one thing I need to spend money on.
These tools are great once you can figure out how to efficiently integrate them into your workflow. Which and I'm as we've discussed, we're always tweaking our workflow.
Yeah,
and I think I've had to train a few editors over the last handful of years, and what I've always said is, here's what I use. It may or may not work for you. There's nothing magical about my system, but it is crucial that you have a system to organize your media. It doesn't have to be mine or Sam's or Philippe's or Post Haste. It could be anything. But you need some method of organizing your media so you can track it, especially if you're handing it off to another editor, because they need to be able to look at files, and P1076 doesn't tell them anything about the file. Yeah. So I think
even if you don't want to rename your file, you just add a comment. This scene includes this shot.
A comment, includes a real name.
Yeah.
Again, as Philip Hodgetts has pointed out in a talk of his back in the day when we were recording on tape, just putting a sticker on there that says, real one. That's metadata. Any information about that content is metadata, and so it's super important. And every year it becomes more and more important. So get in the good habits now.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned from university was to have a good way to organize, because you're going to be at the end of the day you're going to be dealing with potentially terabytes of media, and you need a way to search for it, not look for it. There's a difference between searching and looking. You need to be able to kind of, if you were to give all of those files a comment of, this is exterior shot, factory. If you search exterior shot factory in the Finder, all those things are going to come up. You're going to find them.
Yes, it's no different than a photos library. If you are a wildlife photographer, you don't want bird 1, bird 2, bird 3, bird 4, because you're going to end up with a million birds. So I think, yes, be organized, follow a system, embrace that system.
Yes.
Be open to learning new things. We've all had pretty solid systems. We've learned from each other. We're learning right now. Even the things throughout this episode you guys have mentioned have got my gears kind of spinning. How can I tweak things even more?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a never-ending story. It will never be perfect.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I've learned is not to make folder icons for your folders if you're going to be flexible with, your workflow, because you want something that's going to be flexible for you, something that's easy to understand. Another good thing actually is with project folders is if you were to give that to somebody else, they need to be able to find something. So you need to make it as intuitive, easy to follow, but it also makes sense at the end of the day.
And not even somebody else. You could be handing it off to yourself 5 years later, and what made sense that day, shot 2. You'll have no idea what shot 2 is 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Shot 2, industrial park, night, that means a lot more. So
yeah.
This will always be also a very lengthy discussion. So I
think we'll have a second part, a third part. Yes.
I think it's going to be an evolving topic. It's not going to be a case of one episode is going to cover everything. But it will be. I think I'm looking forward to hearing some comments about from people what other people do. They might completely have a different way of working. They might just have 3 folders: projects, media, and exports. It's like, what justifies that?
And this is NLE agnostic. I mean, we've talked about Final Cut 10 specifically only because that's what we use. But mostly,
Yeah.
I think this is just about data and about renaming. And so there, it's irrelevant what system you
Yeah.
use. I've used Premiere in the past. I am curious to see what Premiere users do on the Finder level, or
Yeah.
DaVinci, or Avid users, or the one Vegas user out there. I'm curious to see what they do.
Now I have two things to say. Sam definitely won the T-shirt award
Oh,
today.
thank you.
I mean,
Come on,
this
that-
T-shirt
Yeah.
is pretty awesome.
I've got my
Boba
off the track shirt on here.
Yeah, Gabe is doing advertisement for the documentary, so I
Yeah.
think Brad is going to be very
Well, I
happy about it.
Boba
And the
Fett.
second
and
thing-
recently, they've just announced a film for Boba Fett now. They're doing it like a Han Solo thing. They're doing.
Yeah,
Boba
I
Fett.
haven't watched yet, so no.
I will
spoilers.
be I will be going to Solo in about 4 hours.
There
to
we
see
go.
it.
Yeah, I'm not that interested to watch it for whatever reason.
Get out.
Second thing
And the
is,
second thing,
yeah, if people were able to get to this point, and if there was any value to this episode at all, just give us a little like, maybe subscribe
yes,
to the channel. We are on iTunes, where you can listen to us there. We are on YouTube. We have the Facebook page. And of course, if anyone has any comments at all, how you were working, how you're doing your workflow, definitely put in the comments down below. It's going to be very interesting to start a discussion about this. Who knows, maybe there's someone else there that is doing something amazing that could benefit us as well. So it's
Yes.
very nice to share that.
We're learning from each other constantly, but we're not doing the show so we can listen to ourselves talk, because we talk privately anyway. This is way too much work for us just to be talking amongst ourselves.
Exactly.
So, like, we really want to hear from you. The thumbs up, the likes.
we want to know what you guys think, and we want to help mold. We want that to help mold the show, and new things will come up in the comments. We can go, that's a great thing to talk about. We want to reach that. We want to cover that in the show, and it will be discussed. So every little bit helps. So that's a catchphrase for a famous supermarket here in the UK. But anyway, thought I'd put that plug in there because it works. But yeah, that's a good episode, guys. I think we covered a little bit about how we help control the chaos that is organising video production and video files and metadata. But if you guys have got any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. And yeah, we'll probably see you in the next episode.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.